in marketing since before we actually had an internet. Yeah. All right, so for those of you who are looking around at us terrified that you might be in a room filled with the undead, I can reassure you that it's actually a relatively recent invention, obviously. You know, it came out, the World Wide Web was literally launched the year I graduated from high school. So many of us have grown up and came up in marketing when we either did not have an internet, we did not have all of this data, but we did have data, or we didn't know what to do with it. It was so novel. I remember when the subject of my book, which is mostly around web analytics and marketing analytics, when marketing analytics was new, when it was just being invented, when it was urgent. So I get the feeling a lot of the folks in this room are not data geeks, so I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of what's in the book. This is the manager's cheat sheet to what is data and how to make strategic decisions with data. Unlike my first book, which Z has a copy of and can show you, which is a conventional textbook and talks about analytics and data, and that's from Flat World, my wonderful, glorious first publisher, and I love them, and not just because they send me coffee. This book is really for people who are, hands up everybody who considers yourself a math phobe, would rather die than do statistics,
That would be
does not like software that gives you numbers and other scary things. This is the guide for those of you who want to figure out how to make decisions strategically. And I talk about how do you understand your customers, how do you understand what content, if you hands up everyone who's doing content marketing, how do you understand which of your content is actually converting your customers the best? How do you understand how to price your products or services? How do you understand how to position them in the marketplace? What are the metrics that will tell you what your best channels are and who your best customers and who your best segments are? So all of that is explained in really simple, plain language in this book. It's a simple encyclopedia. So I don't have PowerPoint. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of activities today.
Oh, good.
Yes! Yes, we will! I know what we're going to do.
I had a glass and a half of wine, tried to put it to work.
Listen, I have cognac. I'm not hard liquor. You better brace yourself. So,
Any excuse.
I'm going to, well, okay, I had like one shot of cognac. Sadly, I'm like this sober. So, you can only imagine if they had given me any more. But I'm also on 5 cups of coffee, so brace yourselves. So, we're going to do a couple of activities of what you can do if you start using data the human way. Because at this table, we were talking a little bit about ChatGPT and the threat that ChatGPT is to a lot of entry-level marketing jobs and maybe some non-entry-level marketing jobs. So, what we're going to do is we're going to walk ourselves through 3 activities. It's going to help you understand better what is the threat of ChatGPT. I mentioned a little bit about the underlying technologies that are in ChatGPT in the book. So buy the book, I need new kitchen floors. And it'll help you understand how these technologies work. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you all to do a little activity. You're going to turn to the person next to you, whether they're a stranger or not. Hopefully it'll give you some chance to network. And I'm going to give you something that you might be tempted to turn to an AI model to solve for you. It's based on a conversation I just had with Chet.
Oh boy.
I know, it just never put us at the same table. So I'm going to give you we got 3 tables, I'm going to give you 3 demographics. And I'm going to give you just what would you target that demographic with? And how? On what channels, with what content, with what offers? But there's going to be a twist to it. So table number 1, you're going to be targeting people who travel with their pets. You got that demographic? All right. Table 2, you're going to be targeting LGBTQ millennials. You got it? All right. Table number 3, you're going to be targeting people with large numbers of children. It's so funny. Or you could choose, you could target teenage girls. Which one?
You be careful with that.
Okay, people with a large number of children. All right. So if you're an AI data model, you've been given given that. You've been told, I want to target these people. Tell me what you think people who travel with pets need as a product or a service.
Luggage.
A carrier.
Leashes and harnesses.
Luggage, okay.
Insurance.
Insurance.
Mhm.
All right. Tell me a product or service you would target to LGBTQ millennials.
Bud Light.
Bud Light.
Seltzer, hard seltzer.
Honestly, I think you actually have the answer to my
Hard
secret question.
seltzer.
Hard seltzer's a good one.
Well, Ava,
gonna say
actually,
clothes.
you just cracked my secret answer in a really sad
I
and
know what it's gonna say.
unfortunately sick and twisted way, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, nice.
You sick and
Oh, we were,
I agree.
I know.
I agree. We wake up.
All right, we were targeting people with a lot of children.
Real estate.
Real estate. Oh, darn it. You two are too smart. Because here's the thing. You know who your person who's traveling with a lot of pets is, your customer? Hannibal. He's crossing the Alps with his elephants.
True.
Your LGBTQ millennial is Alexander the Great. And your parent of a large number of children is Genghis Khan. He did like a lot of
We've all
real
been through
estate.
this. Every generation.
You gonna eat a big carrot?
Alexander liked his alcohol. But I'm never going to stuff an elephant into a pet
carrier.
carrier. You see what we did there? If you are an AI data model, you are going to sell things to people based on a couple of data points that typically have stereotypical outputs. Coincidentally, you might accidentally sell the right thing to the right person. You might sell hard seltzer to someone who drank himself to death at 32. You might sell real estate to somebody who conquered the entire known world. Or, most of the time though, you're trying to sell a man who's invading Rome on the back of an elephant with a carrier for a multi-crew. That is why I would argue that ChatGPT is not a threat to those of us who are data-driven marketers, because as human beings, we understand that other human beings, we get other people because we're people. We understand that they're multifaceted, and as marketers, we have spent our entire careers looking at not just one data point, but dozens and dozens of data points to understand our customers in context. And this is where the conversation came with Chet about the work that he's doing. You can certainly target people based on the context in which you find them, and if you are a robot, as ChatGPT is, you're going to think that that context in which you find them, where those 2 or 3 data points, like they're a woman over 35 with a kid, is the entire sum total of what they want to buy from you. But you and you and you, how many of us fit every single stereotype of our age, of our location, of the number of kids we had, of the school we went to? Some of us sadly do. Most of us do not. And so the part about being a data-driven marketer that I think we need to lean into in this age of ChatGPT is looking at the data and trying to use that to understand the deeper context, but then don't follow the data all the way down to its logical conclusion and to its predictive model. You still need to actually be the person making the decisions based on that data. Because I can tell you that what happens when we start using just predictive analytics, certainly in my own practice, is that we go completely off track. And frankly, even when we gather data in a human way, we can still go off track, and that's the second part of where we as people do not have a lot to fear from the robots yet. I don't know what they're going to do next year. I'll give you an example from my own company. So I can talk about some of my clients, some of them I have confidentiality agreements with, but I can talk about my own company. I can actually talk about one of my greatest failures because it's something that actually turned into my greatest success. So I started my company in 2014. It was the stupidest possible thing to do at the time. My mother had just been diagnosed with a recurrence of the cancer that would eventually take her life. I was flat broke from paying her medical bills. I had my last $300 in the bank, and I had gotten laid off on a Monday afternoon from my job as a VP of marketing at a startup, they could no longer make payroll and asked us to come back and work for free. I said things to them which unfortunately can be printed in a family newspaper because in those days I still had my filters on. And I walked out of that door having a very strong sense of what I was going to do. I had always wanted to start my own marketing agency. And it was actually in April of 2014. It was about 10 days and 9 years from today. It was mid-April, actually no, it was the 21st of April 2014, so only a few days ago. It was the 9th anniversary of doing this. And I walk out the door with my intern who quit on the spot because she wasn't going to be doing a VP of Marketing's job for free, which is what they wanted her to do. And we hugged each other and we parted ways and I started to walk because when I need to think, I walk. And I probably walked about 8 miles that day. I walked all the way from downtown Boston, across Boston Common, down the Longfellow Bridge. And while I was on the Longfellow Bridge, the wind was whistling across the bridge. It was freezing cold. My feet were at that point bleeding because I was in my office shoes. Prior to the pandemic, we wore this thing called high heels. Some of us. It's a very bad idea. And so I called up my friend Rob Adelson, with whom I had been on the board of the IEEE Entrepreneurs Network, and I said to him, Rob, I need you to incorporate my company. And he said, finally, I was wondering when you were finally going to go out on your own. I mean, everybody kind of wondered why you were working for other people. And I said, yeah, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start my own agency. And he said, great, why did this happen? I said, I've been laid off. He said, when did this happen? I said, about an hour and 45 minutes ago. And he laughed at me and he said, well, call me back in 2 weeks when you have a business plan and you've slept on it and I'll do it then. And I get to the bottom of the Longfellow Bridge. If you're familiar with Boston, I landed in Kendall Square and I bumped into my friend who runs Ryder Access Byron White. He's since exited. And I bump into him and I explain, and he says, well, Christina, what's going on? I said, I've been laid off and I'm going to start my own agency. And he high-fived me and he said, I'd like to work with you. The next day I created an ugly logo because I have no graphic design skills, and I used PowerPoint and I posted it to my LinkedIn, my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, everything, and I announced that I have started my own agency and it's called Thoughtlight. And within a couple of hours the phone rang and it was somebody I had networked with years ago who wanted to hire me to build the digital marketing curriculum for what was then the New England College of Business and is now part of Cambridge College, and it's the Global Business Institute. And so from that little data point, I started to go out, very sure of myself, at the ripe old age of 35, and which is not that young. It feels very young now. And I started to ask people what they would want my company to do, and everyone said, well, we need to learn how to be better at digital marketing. We need digital marketing training. That's what we need. Everybody said that to me. And so for the first few months of the company, that's what we were focused on. We were going to do digital marketing training. We had several very successful events where we had over 100 people paying to come to our trainings, and they would go to these trainings and they would get all of this expert information on how to do digital marketing, and then they would panic, and then they would come up to me and say, all right, now that I understand it, I know that it's too difficult for us to do, we want to hire you. And I didn't listen to them, because my data had told me all of my customer discovery interviews, which I had done according to the prescribed methods that you learn about in books, had said I had the data that I had to turn into a training agency and not a regular digital marketing agency. So I pursued that. Somehow, in spite of my own stupidity, I managed to be profitable within 6 months. Mostly, however, from doing the side business of that, doing people's digital marketing for them, while I was 100% convinced that the data was telling me that we have to become a training agency. After about 1.5 years of struggling, I woke up and realized that it doesn't matter what my customers are telling me to my face that they want training. Once they get the training, they come back and they say, can you just do this for us? Can you just do that for us? The data was contradictory, but the money that was coming in didn't lie. I needed to pivot. And so I listened to the right data. And that's how we've been in business now. We're going to be celebrating our 9th year on July 14th. of this year, not our 10th anniversary, but our 9th anniversary, which by coincidence is obviously the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille. I don't know why. So far, heads have not rolled. But that's the point that I want to make to you about being a data-driven marketer. We're constantly getting contradictory signals. We're constantly getting a variety of different inputs, which, if you are following a prescribed system, whether it's something that you've learned or whether it's something in a chat GPT or any of the other machine learning models, can lead you very far astray. And the thing about any of these systems that I talk about in this book is that they are self-reinforcing systems. They only know how to repeat themselves. They learn, quote unquote. But they learn according to one rote formula called an algorithm. As long as they're running on that one algorithm, all of the input that comes in is just going to give you a slightly more refined version of the same decisions that they were taught how to do. Humans are different. Humans are able to make decisions based on nuance, to change the formula by which we think, to change the way that we think, based on new information, and to have that reckoning of saying, I was wrong, I need to change, because I know the most important thing at the end of the day is, am I able to support my family, am I able to make payroll? I'm not going to look at all other inputs as equal. I'm going to look at what really, really matters, and I'm going to focus down on that. And that's something that no AI right now can replicate. So when I say being a data-driven marketer, again, I break down all of the different tools, I break down all of the different metrics, I talk about how you calculate return on ad spend, I talk about all of the different inputs you need to calculate your lifetime customer value. Buy the book. I talk about how to determine what is a good or a bad open rate on an email or a marketing automation, how to optimize your click-through rates through A/B and multivariate testing. I talk about all those bells and whistles and gears and how all of that works. But I can't teach you how to do something that you already know how to do. And that is, you all already are very smart people and you know how to think. And so data-driven marketing is about learning to think with data. That is the critical skill that no machine can replicate. How are we for time, Ken? We're good, okay. So I'm going to go back. We talked about some historical characters. I'm going to ask all of you now to think about your own real data. But I'm going to give you one more final historical analogy before we turn around and we start talking to each other, because that's what human beings do. We talk to each other and we learn from each other. Who here has heard of the Spartans? Not your random high school football team. Okay.
Michigan State.
Right. Michigan State. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm from Boston.
The Falcons. Sorry.
So you're all vaguely familiar with the fact that they were an unbeatable army. Nobody could defeat them. They were completely unconquerable. Would I surprise you if I told you that they actually were finally and soundly defeated by a bunch of random rednecks? They were. And here's the thing. Sparta knew how to do one thing really well, and this is when I get to act it out with dinner plates, because I've had 5 cups of coffee. So they were good at one style of warfare called phalanx warfare, where you would stand with your shield and you would lock shields with the other person next to you, and no one could break through that, and so they actually hardly ever had to fight with anybody. They were just hiding behind those big giant shields that nobody could possibly break through. They also, going back to the conversation that we were having right here at the table, they hated democracy. We think of ancient Greece as the place where democracy came from, but Sparta actually, in spite of the movie 300, where they ran around in Speedos, and I have no idea what they were doing in that movie, in spite of that, they actually were determined to wipe out democracy, and so they would invade different Greek city-states and force them to adhere to their weird form of aristocracy, where you were born into this warrior class called the Spartiates. They were unconquerable. They were these superhuman people. And basically, nobody could vote, nobody had a say, you could not speak your mind. Everything that we think of as democracy, they wiped out, they hated it, they were an aristocracy. One day, a little city called Thebes, which was the leading city, which was the main, not headquarters, I'm blanking on the word, capital of a region called Boeotia, which literally translates into cowland. Cowland! Think of how embarrassing this was for the Spartans. They were conquered by cowland. Cowland got really, really mad at the oppression that they were suffering from at the hands of the Spartans, and so they started fighting them. They were able eventually to defeat them even when they were outnumbered 3-1. And the way they were able to do that is by doing what I'm going to challenge you all to do today and moving forward in your careers as marketers. Sparta, again, knew only how to do this one thing. They completely eliminated the individuality of their people. They took them at the age of 7 and they put them in these military training camps. They were not allowed to see their families. These were people 30 years old who had never even seen their own children because their children lived separately from them. They had absolutely nothing even remotely resembling a normal human life. And they only knew how to do one thing. They had never even been taught how to read and write. Not that that was really relevant in those days. They certainly had not been taught how to think. In fact, they had had any capacity for thinking trained carefully out of them. But not the people of cowland, because what does cowland do? They were cattle ranchers. And how do you survive growing up as a kid on a cattle ranch? You learn to be quick. You learn to have eyes in the back of your head. You learn how to outrun very large things that want to step on you that are not elephants. You learn to be resourceful, you learn to be resilient, and you learn to care about your family and your community. And so one day in 371 BCE, the people of Cowland, the people of Thebes, and their general Epaminondas, and try saying that 3 times, that's how you know that I have not had too much brandy. Epaminondas was a math professor. He was a data geek. See, we're scary when we get really riled up because he was able to look at the data and he said, these people only know how to do one thing, and if we are able to stop them from doing that one thing, and we are forcing them back on the resilience, the quickness on our feet, the ability to look at circumstances as they change and unfold, and our individual ability to meet threats and meet change, by thinking individually as human beings, they haven't got a chance against us, even though there's twice as many of them as there are of us. And so that's what he did. He figured out a way. I'm not going to bore you with all of the different tactics. If you've taken any of my classes, some of you have been subjected to all of the military tactics that I act out, sometimes with candy on my desk. He figured out a way to lure the Spartans into exposing their left flank and smashing into them. Somebody's nodding and is familiar with this perhaps. Smashing into them with a really long and deep column so that they were forced to fight in hand-to-hand combat against these cowland people. It took 57 minutes to destroy the Spartan army once they were forced to think for themselves. Outnumbered 8,000 to 12,000, people who were the laughing stock of the rest of ancient Greece for their lack of sophistication, their lack of table manners, their lack of utensils, the fact that they were cowland. It took them 57 minutes to destroy the greatest army that had ever existed because they didn't know how to think. And ordinary average people who were falling back on their own skills and ability to think on their feet were able to defeat them. At one point, the Spartan king and his 300 bodyguards made an effort to get away from the main thrust of the Theban army, ran behind all of their other troops, and ran to the other end of the battlefield. And guess what? Thebes' elite troops were already waiting for them there because they had grown up herding cattle, and they were fast, and they knew how to outrun those people and wait for them. That's something you can do as a person. That's something acting by rote can never possibly do. And so if you're thinking, how am I going to leverage ChatGPT or any of these other data solutions that we have, it is to do that rote stuff. But never under any circumstances use it to do your thinking for you. It can process data faster than you. It can summarize blog posts and articles better than you. This book that I wrote, even before there was ChatGPT, some of the chapter summaries, I ran through an early version of that, and it just summarized everything I had written and repeated it in slightly different words, and then I edited that. It's really good at that. It's really good at the boring work, at regurgitating stuff, at lather, rinse, and repeating it. But the ideas in this book and the actual content that it summarized had to come from here, but it mostly had to come from 22 years in marketing. That experience is what you need to fall back on. And so one of the things you should do, other than buying this book because I need kitchen cabinets, and no, I need it whole. It's a remodel.
Counters?
I got the counters already. Those are paid for from the royalties of the first book. Anyway, other than that, you need to think about how to deal with the unexpected data. Ken just mentioned that we are all regrouping after the pandemic. Could any of us have anticipated the pandemic? Could a robot have anticipated that? No. And it's that unexpected data that you can triumph by learning how to respond to it. And if you can do that, your job is completely future-proof. And most of the people here in this room are pretty senior. Your job is fairly future-proof because you're not doing rote work. But if you're more junior, or if you're in any way worried about how am I going to operate in a world where more and more is dictated by AI and machine learning, it's by learning how to deal with the unexpected. It's by learning how to deal with what are you doing when the Spartans are suddenly going around to the other side when you could not have imagined that they were going to do that, so you got to get there and wait for them. It's by learning how to deal with the fact that you found out that the person who's traveling with pets has actually got a horde of elephants. And how am I going to market to them? What do elephants wear? Maybe a cute little bow tie that says Fluffy. I don't know. So I'm going to ask all of you to actually do that. I want all of you can do it in pairs, you can do it in groups, you can do it one person per table. But I want everyone in the groups to turn to each other, and I'll walk around, same as I do in my class, and share one very surprising piece of information that has come to you in your business recently. It could be a number, it could be quantitative data, or it could be qualitative data, like the customer conversation that you had that surprised you about a product feature. It could be any data point that you have recently been exposed to that surprised you. A ChatGPT or any other AI or ML or any of these tools or any robot is not going to be able to deal with that. So together we're going to put our heads together and figure out how to deal with that. We can do one person per table. Everyone can share if you have a minor data point. But I want you to take 10 minutes to think creatively around one single data point and come up with a creative response to that.
Christina, we may have to break a little, got about 10 minutes left,
Okay,
so we may want to,
then let's do it right now.
okay.
All right, so you have 10 minutes to solve one data point problem. And when we get back, let's do 9 minutes and then let's go around each table and share what we came up with. All right, make sense? All right, go for it. Did I grab everybody?
Things about me before
Ken says we should wrap up.
I don't know. Allergies.
I was trying to make the topic.
I know, thank you.
Very
sensitive.
I'm showing my age.
More generic.
Ken is telling us we should wrap up, but I want to hear what all of you are saying.
Or.
I don't know.
This is a smart table over
This is
here. I
a
can
smart
tell.
table. Yeah, we can tell this is a smart table. So we'll get to you last. No, but I'd love to hear what each group came up with. What was your surprising piece of data and what was the creative solution to it? Almost everyone's
They
gone from
left.
this table.
You scared everybody
I
away.
think I
You
scared
also
them away.
asked for something qualitative, not
Yes.
necessarily quantitative.
Exactly. So what was
So
it?
getting feedback from people, why they're using this information, is why we accommodated their needs.
Yes.
We specifically accommodated their needs.
That's fabulous. And what was the action you took based on that? Just
Continue to find ways to accommodate
I am not.
So-
client needs.
listen up, everybody. Richard, just and where do you work, Richard?
Well, I'm retired now, but this was for fundraising for college scholarships.
So Richard was talking about you got a piece of qualitative data, which is people do business with you because,
We accommodated their needs.
and that allowed them to understand what part of their business was their nonprofit work was working and remain successful. So that's a good example of it's like that little piece of data was what everything hinged on. So thank you for sharing that. Any advice to the rest of the group based on that?
I I think it's a matter of understanding what your client needs are first, regardless of the product.
Exactly.
Products are like water, they find their own level.
I love that phrase, products are like water, they found their own level.
She's gonna put that in her next book.
And I'm gonna give
I
you.
get quoted though.
Of course I'm gonna quote it, in fact, I'm gonna quote that.
You get one kitchen drawer.
I get a plaque on the inside of the drawer.
But it's gonna be the drawer that has like the best utensils in it. Alright, this group, what did you all talk about? Chet, it was all Chet.
No, Chet.
I learned that I need to do more listening. Actually, listening is a real important thing to do, because really, when we're looking at solving client, that's all it is. It's all about listening.
Of course.
But I brought up the issue of health data post-Dobbs decision, and how there's a lean in right now to put some categories of health data and precise location data off the table for marketers. But doing so in a wholesale approach, where I don't think it necessarily protects women, because there are other proxies and others in the world of algorithms are looking for patterns. So algorithms can find patterns where we least expect them. And we could have other data signals from the marketplace that might indicate a person's proclivity to a particular service that we just hadn't thought of. And even though we have may have health data restrictions as a result of Dobbs, and these are being debated right now in state houses and in Congress. It's just a matter of really always understanding how we're using data to serve a customer, but also if it's are there non-marketing uses for business that need to be scored from a risk perspective. And I just think right now we're living in a world right now where every data use that we're involved in, I think we're gonna have to start scoring our data use from a risk perspective. And I think probably our lawyers are making us do that now already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I'm gonna bring this home for you.
Thank you, Barry.
The legislation is the shield wall.
Yeah.
That says you can't touch any data behind this wall.
Yes.
But as a creative marketer, we can look at other data that's outside of that wall, that's not behind that wall of restricted data, and that will help us to be able to infer that even though we don't know that Pam has allergies, we do know that Pam has been doing research about the side effects of Zyrtec, and therefore there's a good likelihood that she has allergies, and we can get at her data that way.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Barry.
Proxy data.
Thank
It's
you.
all
Proxy
about proxy data.
And you said they're the smart table?
They're the, I don't know. This is a smart table. All right.
I think Barry, to your point, group is a lot of legislation, and states don't really understand business, okay? Anchor, who's been around, we're celebrating 54 years, we get these, and we get these NDAs that are this thick, and it's from a lawyer who wrote it, but they don't understand the client's business, and they also don't understand how they're using the data, and that's a very big problem. I think they should spend time understanding what their end use is doing, whether it's direct mail, whether they're uploading to LiveRamp, or they're doing email deployment. They need to understand. We hired the DMA many years ago when we got involved with digital services and email deployment, and they use Venable, who I think you know, Chet, Barry may know, and they said basically we have a formal letter saying you are allowed to deploy third-party data to anybody you want, and that was the end result. So we explained to clients you could use it. So data is a very big name, right? And 8 years ago, everyone said big data, now it's CDP data, and now it's this, and now it's that. I think at the end of the day, it's how do you utilize your data, what is important for your client, and what is the end result. And if you can achieve that and move forward, I think you're going to be a positive client.
Well stated. we have, right, Ken?
I think we're getting, wrapping up, it's a little after 2, but, one, want to thank Christina Inge for coming down from Boston. And boy, how would we like to be a student in her class, what a storyteller, you are.
Well, thank you. I have a class that's non-credit, so anyone can enroll through Harvard Continuing Education that's coming in September, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, I will start sharing that out. You can enroll in that if you want.
Very good, and I need to do one bit of business, but thank you so much for coming down, and we just want to thank all of our annual sponsors, which starts with Wyland, and with Alliant, and Starista, Astra, Claritas, Epsilon, here today. Summer Friday, CML, Jeff Solson, and McVicker, and Hickenbottom.
Yeah, baby.
So, anyway, we got a couple events coming up. We've got the boat cruise next month, and just look at the schedule for some other things we may add. But really, thank you all for making the effort to be here and helping us reestablish in-person luncheons.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Good job.
Great to see you guys.
We'll put muzzle on this guy next time.